Welcome to section 7.1 of metabolism. In this video, we will focus on memorizing the details of two glycogen storage diseases, von Guericke disease and Cori disease. Let's get started. Our story occurs in a pleasant little candy land. Notice that the trees look like candy. Now these trees are cut down and harvested by the people of this area. When the candy is chopped up, the townspeople are provided with lots of sugar, or glucose. In this way, each candy tree represents glycogen. When it gets chopped up and harvested, glucose is produced. Now the people of this town are typically very happy. However, one day, things go horribly wrong when the truck carrying a large load of freshly cut candy trees breaks. See all of these candy tree logs barreling down the hill? Well, as these roll down, they crash into this very important machine. This is the glucose 6-phosphatase machine. You can even see its title right here on the machine. Now G6-PAse, or glucose 6-phosphatase, is used to break glucose 6-phosphate into glucose for the body. When there is a deficiency in glucose 6-phosphatase, patients develop von Guericke disease. Now this G6-PAse machine normally takes the glycogen candy tree and breaks it down into glue. The glue bottles are then produced from the machine, travel down the conveyor belt, and deposit into brown boxes at the end of the line. Now this image demonstrates glycogen breakdown and is discussed in section 7 of metabolism. Glucose 6-phosphatase is right here. See how it converts glucose 6-phosphate into glucose. And this little star represents von Guericke disease. Now since this machine normally takes the glycogen and puts out glucose, with it broken, we won't get any glucose, which is represented in this image by glue. So all the empty boxes without the glue that should be in them represents hypoglycemia. And this is very important to know because normally people need glycogen to break down glucose when they're fasting. So when patients with von Guericke disease fast, their body tries to break down glycogen, but they can't. So they end up not having enough glucose and they have severe fasting hypoglycemia. Now going back to our story, you can imagine that not having enough glue can create a whole host of problems for our candy workers. For example, look at this acid spewing from the machine onto this unlucky peppermint worker. When the acid gets on him, it causes him to poop himself. For this reason, the peppermint candy workers call this type of acid laxative acid. This laxative acid represents lactic acidosis, which occurs in patients without functional glucose 6-phosphatase, which is a direct result of not having enough glucose. Now let's look at these little purple balls falling out of the machine. These represent periodic acid shift stains. Now, periodic acid shift stains, or PAS stains, stain purple in the presence of glycogen. And with glycogen building up in various organs, especially in the liver, you can take a biopsy of the liver, then do a PAS stain, and if you see bright purple, that indicates there's lots of glycogen stored within the liver. Now this is a histological slide of a liver biopsy containing a PAS positive stain. The bright purple you see shows glycogen is present. As I just mentioned, glycogen builds up in the liver, causing it to enlarge. Notice this cute little Dalmatian dog with a big liver spot. This will help you remember that in glucose 6-phosphatase deficiency, or von Guericke disease, glycogen builds up in the liver. The absence of all the glue is very serious for the candy people. In a panic, this peppermint worker carelessly slips on a brick of butter. This butter represents high triglycerides. Butter, after all, is loaded with triglycerides. So when you remember this panicking peppermint worker, remember that in patients with glucose 6-phosphatase deficiency, they have high levels of triglycerides in their blood. Now during the descent of these glycogen logs, the toe of this poor worker was smashed. Look how big and swollen it is. This big red swollen toe represents gout, which is caused by high levels of uric acid in the blood, or hyperuricemia. So big red toe for hyperuricemia. Another candy worker was injured when a log rolled over him and it caused his leg to break off. Now these candy workers, as you can imagine based on what they're made of, have knees that break all the time. And normally they just glue themselves back together. However, they are clearly out of glue. You could say there is no glue for his knee, or no gluconeogenesis. Thus, his leg remains separated. Now this highlights a very important idea that patients with glucose 6-phosphatase deficiency don't have proper gluconeogenesis, which we discussed before. Although there was no glue for this damaged peppermint, this kind friend is offering a gallon of figs. Not a great consolation, but it's a sweet thought. You can see the volume of the container is identified clearly with the label GAL. For our purposes, GAL stands for galactose. Now let's discuss the figs in this gallon. Figs contain lots of fructose. In fact, among all fruits, figs are right there at the top in terms of concentration of fructose. So whenever you think of figs, think fructose. It's super convenient that they both start with the letter F. Fig, fructose. In any case, this broken victim is kindly refusing the gallon of figs. His refusal represents a very critical idea. Fructose and galactose must be avoided in these patients. That's because both of these monosaccharides only make things worse in patients with glucose 6-phosphatase deficiency. So again, peppermint refusing a gallon of figs for avoiding fructose and galactose. Now look over to the right of the image. These workers are made of a completely different kind of candy. so they represent a different type of disease, Cori disease. Now these candy corn workers are hard at work, removing the branches from the glycogen tree. In this way, they are debranching the tree. This represents the fact that the debranching enzyme is deficient in patients with Cori disease. So again, candy corns debranching the glycogen tree at the corner. And the debranching enzyme is identified right here, and that blue star correlates with the blue star down here representing Cori disease. Now most of these linkages, as you can see, are alpha-1,4 linkages. However, this strange linkage right here is an alpha-1,6 linkage. So this debranching enzyme breaks this alpha-1,6 link, which is why we consider it a debranching enzyme. To reinforce this idea, we have this little helper measuring the angle of the branch with a protractor, and he yells 6 degrees. This will help you remember that the debranching enzyme breaks the alpha-1,6 linkage, not the typical alpha-1,4 linkage like the other enzymes. So candy corns debranch the alpha-1,6 linkages at the corner. Now, a lack of debranching enzyme is often considered a milder form of the condition demonstrated on the left of the image. However, it is not without its challenges. Without the ability to debranch, glycogen builds up. Again, mostly in the liver. So this little spotted Dalmatian dog has a prominent liver spot to help you remember glycogen buildup. Now this cute little candy corn is flying a kite. This kite represents ketoacidosis, which is common in these patients. Notice how he is trying to get the attention of the peppermint getting sprayed by the laxative acid. He's trying to get his attention so he can cheer him up. It's a kind gesture, but it cost him dearly. While he was distracted, his kite flew right into the leg of his fellow candy corn, breaking it horribly. See all of these little purple balls bleeding from his wound? These again represent periodic acid shift stains, which are positive in glycogen liver biopsies in these patients. Fortunately for the debranching candy corn workers, they still have enough glue with which to glue their knees. And this little candy corn worker gluing his knee will help you remember that gluconeogenesis is intact in Cori disease. And with that, you have completed the image containing all of the details of 2 glycogen storage diseases, von Gierke disease, glucose-6-phosphatase deficiency, and Cori disease, debranching enzyme deficiency.